quite an exciting topic and a very topical moment, I think, to have a debate and explore some case studies around this very interesting topic. So thank you very much for attending. We are an audience of people dealing with the same issues and challenges and opportunity. All of us are dealing with energy strategy, balancing obviously energy security, security of supply with decarbonization targets that have been set, and a very fast-moving world of being able to reach and comply with different elements in terms of energy strategy, procurement, and implementation, and also looking at the considerations around that. We have today a webinar on the just energy transition, and that also includes sort of asset recycling and mine closure and reuse slash repurposing. We are going to explore a number of interesting points using this as the anchor. The key message for today that we want to explore is how to transform current liabilities into assets, different type of assets, be it economic, social, energy, and or climate assets. So there's a number of fast-moving parts as decarbonization, ESG are all evolving, and I think it's a really opportune moment in time to discuss this. We are all, of course, experts in the room. There's a varied mix of financial and engineering backgrounds on the room. I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Arnoldus van der Herk of R4 Mining. Dr. Arnoldus van der Herk has a PhD in geology and is a carbon specialist, and is a specialist in the world of mining and energy and the crux between mining and energy. He has worked firstly in oil exploration, then in a number of roles in mining, and also energy and mining. He's also done considerable work in renewables, financial evaluation and analysis, etc. And very recently is now also an ESG lecturer, among other things. Arnold sits on the board of several mining associations in Peru and Chile. He has also spent considerable time in China, in Mauritania, and parts of West Africa. And last but not least, he invented the term climate mining some years ago, and was one of the earliest people, certainly that I've been aware of, to talk about the integration of renewable energy and mining as early as 2002, was really talking about how that is going to unfold in the future. And back in 2002, projected that by 2020, there would be 3 or 4 gigawatts of renewables being procured by mines. Of course, now we see that statement, which was quite progressive and perhaps optimistic in those days, now just all of us in this room are procuring much larger than 3 gigawatts. So we're going to be talking about really latest trends of using underutilized assets and converting them into climate assets. And the goal of our presentation today is really to explore opportunities that might make our lives all easier, or our jobs all easier, as we are planning and implementing strategies. And we're looking at a lot of integration of different strategies, and we're anchoring that down very practically into what that means for your business and your operation, how you can incorporate some of these new elements of thinking into your planning, and how these can actually optimize your clean energy assets and optimize your clean energy planning, and also address certain additional problems that you might have that are quite frankly, also of huge strategic importance, such as social, jobs, and environmental considerations. So that's the introduction. Dr. Arnoldus is a friend of Cresco and working with us on several projects. He has run a number of workshops for energy professionals, specifically IPPs and EPCs, to get more acquainted with the mining world and understand mining specific needs. He's been running those workshops at the Energy and Mining Conference in Toronto since 2012. A lot of the IPPs from NL to EPCs such as Juvie, etc., have all been sort of trained under Arnoldus. So he's really sat on both sides, I would say, in terms of being a miner himself and also on the development side. So without further ado, over to Arnoldus to walk us through this very interesting topic today. Thank you, Arnoldus.
Thank you, Dominic, for your excellent presentations of something talk about Arnoldo's. Okay, thank you very much for Cresco and also for all the attendees to invest this time to hear me. And let's go to I will share now the presentation. Let me know if you sorry. Do you see my slide?
Yes, we can see it. I think just put it into full screen mode there, Arnoldus, but it is coming up.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's right, no?
Perfect.
Okay. Shall we go? These are the contents we will talk today about problems, solutions, and several types of mining closure. But also the most important thing is to look for new uses of or discover possibilities, as the Simon Sinek quote we see it here, no, especially about carbon farming and carbon and natural-based solutions. So first, I want to talk you about the main problems that the mining companies has now. So I pick up the three Ernst & Young reports to 2020, 2021, and 2022, and I organized these 10 top risk priorities from the priority 1 or risk 1 to risk 10. And we will see that the last year's license to operate was the top 1 in the last 3 years, and now is the top 3. The decarbonization wasn't involved in the sector in the questions of Ernst & Young by 2019, but then grows to the number 4, and then number 2. And finally, they separate the term license to operate into two terms, environmental and social is first. If we talk about the Olympic Games, we could tell that the gold medal is social environmental, the second is decarbonization, and the third is license to operate. These are the main risks of mining today. So, but there are other types of risks that we have to pay attention, especially all the things linked to greenwashing. So we have to be to take care about what we communicate to the crown or to the pen. And then another type of risk is all the things linked to not in my backyard, no?
Oh yeah, earlier long ago.
Sorry, could everybody please turn on mute? Excuse me, in case you've joined and not on mute. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
So these are external problems of the mining society. But when we talk about the internal problems, there are several. One of these is the London Metal Exchange assessment. They will need for mining companies by the end of 2024 to be compliant with the ESG standards, because if not, they can suspend and delist mines and that don't commit with ESG, and also in the side of the mineral resource and reserve certification standards that since last year you need to put an ESG professional in order to make all the pre-feasibilities and feasibility reports. So that's very important, because the value of the companies, the value of the mines depends on the proven reserves. So in that case, there are other types of commitments, like all the things linked to the SDG, the 17 ESG commitments for 2030. And then the scope 1 and 2 and scope 3 commitments of different companies in the sector, no? So, and finally, the ICCM members that I think most of you are belonging to them, they also have different types of commitments related with disclosure opening, preferably the accepting the action to scope 3 and focus on absolute reduction and apply robust technologies. But the key questions is we have to pay attention about that. Have you internalized the following dates on your company's commitments to publish transparently, which means ESG compliance for new exploration, greenfield and brownfield is the feasibility report is right now. You have to do now. ESG compliance for the London Metal Exchange is by the end of 2024. 100% scope 1 and 2 decarbonization plan must by 2050 or earlier. You have to publish now. And then finally, the scope 3 decarbonization plan by the end of 2023 or as soon as possible, as ICMM commitments say. So, and pay attention, there are scope 3 upstream activities to mining operation linked more to marketing, to the operations, and then there are the type of scope 3 downstream activities linked to marketing, right? So, shall we go to one of the most important things to understand in mining, in all the things linked to, circular economy? No. So if we see this figure, this figure links us, I need to change one thing. This figure shows a particular relevance of the European community. When they say about when they talk about circular economy, so they say, okay, the current this current graphic belongs to EIT Raw Materials, the European Institute of Innovation and Technology, developing raw materials into better strength for Europe. It is a profit and loss approach for materials. This linked to an old paradigm, because this is a vision from mining consumers, not for mining producers. So what about the vision of circular economy for miners? And we developed this other graph in order to explain that. No, that in this graph we could say that we have not only greenfield exploration, design and construction, operation and metallurgy, but also in most cases of mine, there are a new brownfield exploration, a new development, new operations closure, and so on. So in this area of this new brownfield exploration, we have to make some progressive closure. That's typical for coal mining sector, but also for copper, for example. No? And then finally, a final mining closure. And we will propose four types of solutions: energy-based solutions to close the mine, nature-based solutions, culture-based solutions, farming-based solutions, and also sometimes it's a mix and hybrid solutions to understand that. And that's very important because that changes this profit and loss approach to a balance sheet circular approach. So we will talk about circular mining assets. So the key question is, do you recognize that the mine closures are usually capture onsets and never carbon capture onsets and never carbon offsets? And when I tell you this, because a lot of miners talk about, oh, these are about carbon offsets, and this is not real. When we are closing mines, we are in the ownership or in the territory of the mining. So if we see this matrix, we see carbon capture and storage and emissions reduction. These three solutions, the 2, 3, and 4, belongs to on mine. So because these solutions capture and sequester carbon, these are inside the mine. We have to talk about carbon onsets, not carbon offsets. Carbon offsets is when we talk about other outside the mine. No? And the first one and its solutions is also in the mine, but is only linked to emissions reductions, no to carbon capture. So if we understand that, we can develop this approach to another circular approaches linked to environmental and social circular assets. Start with the environmental point of view. Water is very important in mining. So we have to think that when we start to make greenfield exploration, design, operation, metallurgy, we are using water. Even if you are recycling 90% of the water, you have a 10% of liabilities in this water, right? And then in the brownfield exploration, if we use bioenergy-based solutions, nature-based solutions, we could introduce this new water inside because thanks to spatially forestry and regenerative agriculture, we could increase by 8 to 15 times more the water retention in the area. No, so and also when we close in the final closure of the mine, we could use bioenergy, natural and farming-based solution, not culture. These are really an asset, an environmental asset. And our currency here are cubic meters of water. So this is a water circular approach. So when we are talking about social assets, the best way to measure social is about counting the new jobs. So in that case, during greenfield design and construction operation and metallurgy and so forth, mining is an asset because they are giving jobs to the people. So that's fine. But when they have to start to close in progressive closure or final closure, then they lose jobs. And there are a lot of problems about that. So all these 4 solutions, 1, 2, 3, 4, that we will see later, then can recycle or make circular jobs, transforming this potential social liabilities into social assets. So that's very important to understand how to use this ESG approach in terms of balance sheet and no profit and loss. So next slide. So do you understand ESG finance intelligence? This is my key questions, because balance sheets reveals always the most. So let me tell you this matrix that I think is very interesting in order to rearrange our minds about all the things about ESG. When we talk about finance footprints, we use always 3 instruments. So the income statement, this profit and loss approach, balance sheet approach, and cash flow statement, approach. We could apply this on carbon, on water, and on social. In that way, carbon footprint, decarbonization statement, in the balance sheet approach, annual decarbonization report, cash flow approach, carbon flow statement. And also in water in CSR report, the typical CSR reports. And in balance sheet, really, an ESG report is the balance sheet approach, not the profit and loss. You have to show your road, but really what the report needs is this kind of balance sheet report. I put the E in red. And the cash flow approach is water flow statement. In social footprint, we have the same social in the CSR report. Then in balance sheet is the annual ESG report and social flow statement. When we making this approach, we could connect the dots, because one of the problems in not only mining, in most of the companies in general, is how to connect the dots about social, environmental, economic, and climate. No? So shall we go several case studies? When we think about the first solution, this is linked to energy solutions. Did you know that in 2005 the world's largest solar PV installation was a lignite mine closure in Germany? There's one, 3.4%, the worst in the world, not only in mining. So this is one of the examples how to close a mine. Then we have this another example is the SAR Commission mine closure of the Mexico groups in Arizona. And you see, I chose this picture because we could see how they are building the closing of 20 megawatts in USA. And also another very important thing is about the Environmental Protection Agency in US. They develop most of 1 gigawatt of solar PV, wind, biomass in mine and industrial closures in USA. Even of the report of this year, they say they have mine lands 17,756 sites of mine lands in order to develop 80,525 megawatts of capacity right now. No? But it's not only a question of generation of solar energy, but also it's a question of developing batteries. And here we have a beautiful development in Australia, the Kidston project of a former barrack mine, when they use these 2 crops, these 2 pits, using the pump and hydro battery in front of supporting this 270 megawatts of solar PV. No, so we see.
I have a question there, Arnaldus. Excuse me for interrupting. A question and a comment. So to understand this correctly, the concept of using mine closures for renewables is not new. As you mentioned, you've got the plant there in the top right in Germany. I think what is new is how we're able to optimize this this repurposing of the asset to solve other challenges and other problems. And I think that is the new point, what we're mentioning today. So, you know, you mentioned that in the US, the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, has identified around 17,000 mine sites, which are potential renewable sites to do. I believe that in South Africa, if I'm not mistaken, there's around 6,000 mine sites that could potentially be used to generate renewables. We all know, since a lot of us in the room are procurers and consumers and prospective buyers of renewables, that there are not also a whole lot of available sites actually that could meet all of our targets if we are all to try and achieve our targets. So this is a latent opportunity. And then just in terms of Eskom's Just Energy Transition Plan, you know, there's around 22 gigawatts of Eskom's coal fleet that is, you know, that is in different stages of being decommissioned. And I think that, you know, the point to make is that initially it was thought that, you know, this could just be renewables. But then what we found is that renewables, unfortunately, do not create a humongous amount of jobs. Renewables through development, construction, and operation, you know, create a relatively small amount of jobs in comparison to a mining operation or even a fossil fuel plant. So this is one way by augmenting, you know, different value or different purposes, bolting on, so to speak, you know, to renewables projects, these different elements where one is able to address different problems. And that, I think, is the point that we are exploring today, and converting those into different types of assets at the same time, assets that can optimize how much carbon can be reduced, at the same time have a real transition in terms of sustainable job creation, and also create for-profit businesses turning these liabilities into assets. I just wanted to make that question and comment. And I do see that we have had a question so far in the chat room. I think that we will address those at the end of the call. Please feel free to pop all of your questions in that chat. Yeah, thank you very much. And at the end of the session, we look forward to going through those questions and perhaps sparking some debate. Thanks, Arnaldus.
Okay, thank you, Dominic. But I will tell you, renewables give a lot of jobs. But as the Australian miner says, flying in, fly out. So jobs in China, not jobs in local. With one exception, biomass. If you develop biomass, you need plant, you need agriculture, energy linked to agriculture, and that can give you huge amount of number of jobs. But anyway, this is one piece. And the second is when you talk about this 6,000 mines without closure, most of them are now responsibility of the government. So what we say in Spanish, as an example, in Peru, they say pasivos mineros, mining liabilities, and they separated mining liabilities for mining closure, because mining closure is responsibility for mining companies, and the mining liability is responsible for the government. No, so you need this link in order to develop. Okay, shall we forward? So in the second solution is more cultural heritage based solution. But there's another also. This is another type. I will show you several examples, but please is all the curious things. No, the first example shows a quarry closure near the city of Shanghai, which was transformed into 5-star hotel, including a waterfall with hydropower. This is a beautiful solution. The sounds of flamenco songs in the underground southeastern Spain mines was the origin of one of the world's most famous ethnic music events. So they talk not only about flamenco, but also the positive mining cultural heritage. In Cornwall, UK, is a Foreman clay mine with no soil plants that converted into beautiful global garden with covered biomes, and there is a touristic hub with arts and culture performance. And finally, oh no, and there is also other type of examples like the several salt mines change into churches around the world. This is an example of Zipaquira in Colombia, a World Heritage Sites. But without any doubt, the archetype of cultural closures is another UNESCO World Heritage Site is the Sovelheim mine in Essen, Germany. Museum, cultural events, gastronomy to see. I visited in 1998, and this is, sorry, 1989, and this is still running with successful today. Okay. Another type of solution are the natural-based solutions. If we talk about wilding, here we have the example of the Oji Koto mine in the north-central Namibia. B2 Gold produced 1,000 limited edition Namibian Rhino gold bars, and the investment can support to communities into their work to secure the future for the last and most significant population of free roaming black rhinos of the left hand. And then the project of Okavango Delta, Okavango Eternal is protected by within Botswana and the critical headwaters that supply into Angola and Namibia are not put to the future. So this is a joint venture between De Beers, and National Geographic. There are other types. There are wildlife corridors, grazing ecology, rewilding pollinators, trophic cascades, and wetlands. There are different types of wildland mining closures. But shall we go to most interesting things now, especially for mining, is all the things. The forestry is probably the most widely used natural-based solution in mine closure. Here we have several cases. For example, the closure of Glencore smelter in Sudbury in Ontario, Canada, a former Australian Alcoa. Here you see during operation and then when they closed, or the bauxite closure example of Rio Tinto mine. No, sorry, this is an example of Antamina is in Peru in a desert. This part, yes, they started with desert and they start to develop a new forest in close to the desert. So Antamina belongs to Glencore, BHP, and Teck Resources, and this is a polymetal mine. And then the bauxite mine in Rio Tinto, Australia. That's very curious because they don't have topsoil. They have to develop a new topsoil in order to close the mine. And finally, there is a beautiful example of Glencore West Side coal mine in Australia with you see the change during operation and after rehabilitation. The question is, any of this uses the carbon measurements? We will talk later about that, no? And why. So, and finally, in that moment, there are a lot of new developments in other places. So what we talk of blue carbon. Blue carbon is a new type of natural-based solution because they are underwater. BHP develops blue carbon off the coast of Australia, and De Beers invests in blue carbon from kelp forestry in Namibia. Also, mangroves are vital for carbon capture, but also for social connotations with fishing, water production, and so on. This is an example of a great success, an example in Senegal. No? So, and this here you have the abatement potential for established and emerging blue carbon solution by 2015, with all the potential of this new natural-based solutions. Right, but shall we go to maybe our most important natural-based solution in the case of it's not natural, but anyway, you have to think that all farming is carbon farming. So when you plant anything, you are capturing carbon from the atmosphere and put it into the soils. So, but the regenerative agriculture is the top social carbon farming sequestration technique. The benefits are carbon farming, capture and sequestration, increase agricultural productivity, reduce soil erosions, improve soil structure and facility, reduce salinity, decrease biodiversity, buffering against drought, 8 to 15 times higher water retention. And their principles are, you will see here in this figure, as limited disturbance, are more diversity and integrates animal, minimize or eliminate tillage, protect the soil, integrates. In order to understand the terminology, we could say that regenerative agriculture is conservation agriculture plus holistic grazing, enhanced biodiversity, and organic farming. No. So finally, if you want, you will see here a video, a link of video where there is some communication of Exaro talking about regenerative agriculture and mining closure they are thinking about to develop. Okay, so regenerative agriculture is not only agriculture, it's also catering. And there is a beautiful example of in the lead and coal operation at Glencore in Australia. If you see before, during operation and after rehabilitation. And why? Because they develop grazing trials there. And there's a very beautiful example of how to apply this fascinating example of regenerative agriculture. And why I tell you, because they have also made the measurements of how was the quality of pastures and the quality of animals before the in the natural pasture and the rehabilitated pasture. And there are some increases of 10 to 15, even 20% of the weight of the animals and also of the quality and so on. So that's you could see directly how this is really a social positive heritage in a coal mine. No? So, but the key question is, why haven't any previous mine closure examples measured carbon sequestration till now? This is a great why they don't do that before. And I will tell you that among others for the following reasons. Until 2020, the technology did not allow to measure and certify the capture and sequestration biological carbon. And the root depth LiDAR drones were not bankable until very recently, until last year. Carbon markets have not recently begun accepting underground plant carbon certificate, because carbon is not only in the plant, but especially on the roots and on the biology in the soils. No, and because closing mine engineers are not specialists in so far in carbon capture and sequestration. But this allows companies such Unilever, PepsiCo, Nestle, Walmart, Microsoft, Rabobank, and more than 40 Fortune 500 companies to develop regenerative agriculture and carbon farming sequestration since 2025. So we see this is an excellent opportunity for mining closure to certify carbon sinks and annual sequestration. Remember, mining carbon offsets, not carbon offsets. And in doing so, we made simulation. Please think about a mine with 1 million tons of annual tons of CO2 equivalent annual carbon footprint, and this mine has a net zero program, reducing energy, implementing clean energy in order to do this. Is the clean energy abatement curve we could see here in green. So doing this, clean power and fuels for scope 1 and 2 avoided emissions, right? So then which means net zero by 2050, right? So then this mine will introduce every year 5,000 hectares of natural-based solutions, especially regenerative agriculture, until to arrive to 2015 with 100,000 hectares, right? So this is the carbon sequestration abatement curve, the columns, the blue one, right? So the net zero will arrive to 2034. If you see here, sorry, 2034, right? So the net positive from 2035 to 2050, and the total carbon removal means the clean energy, the avoided emissions plus the carbon sequestration is the red line. You see here, and we arrive to net zero by 2028, and net positive from 2029 to 2050. Even in the last year, we have a positive 1.68 million tons of carbon, in that case, mostly carbon sequestration, right? So when we use this kind of simulation, we need to understand better the numbers. And due to the fact most of you are belong from South Africa, I would like to make this yoke. So what do cumulative carbon footprint allows widen development in terms of South African national parks? So that belongs of our case study, but in the cumulative carbon footprint, right? So if we don't do nothing, which means, sorry, here we have tons of CO2 equivalent, and here we have years. A cumulative annual 1 million of tons means by 2015, 29 million tons of carbon footprint. With only clean energies avoided emissions, finally, in a cumulative point of view, we have 13 million of tons of CO2. But if we use this combination of both clean energies avoided emissions plus a carbon capture rate sequestration, finally, we have a negative or a positive, in that case, 18 million tons. So what these numbers means if we make a comparison with the South African national parks, we see if we don't do nothing, it's like to burn close to 15, a percentage of 15 Kruger part. So 190 hectares. So it's burn that. This is the carbon they have. If we use this second solution, the net zero, is like building a new park of 150,286 hectares. It's more or less the equivalent of 7.97% of the Kruger Park. But if we choose the third one, it's like when we say what we say net positive is like a building in 449,727 hectares, is like to do a new national park equivalent to 23.68% of new Kruger Park. So how to translate the carbon footprint or the cumulative carbon footprint in a positive way? This is good for communications. No, so but there are no type of cost. So we made now on a slide. I made you on a slide in order to know what are the economic risks implicit in these models. If we take the conclusions of the carbon price forecast published by Bloomberg New Energy Finance, we have the following three scenarios. They say SB-T1, hybrid, and voluntary market. When we do this, what we say? What we see for the SB1 T1 scenario, this one here, you say the numbers in US dollars, the total and the average, the SB-T1 scenario, the hybrid scenario, and the voluntary market scenario. This is yearly. This is the balance I will tell you about. For the SB1 scenario, we don't if we don't reduce any emissions of this 1 million tons of carbon footprint year, that will reach to $3.72 billion of value, right? So if we do in the green point of view, when we talk about to use green energies, so we reduce from 3.7 to 2.3 billion US dollar. And if we add carbon capture and sequestration, we reduce until 706 million tons. This is the first one, right? So, sorry. Come on. So here we see the same in a graphic. No, this is the prices. So the cost until, for example, in 2050, the cost if we don't do nothing is 120 million in a year. No, in the green is zero because we arrived in that time to net zero, and with carbon capture and green avoided, we arrived to we could sell $202 million of rights. No, so if we see the voluntary, okay, you'll see we have the hybrid scenario with 2.1 billion US dollar, or the climate mining scenario is 450. But the beautiful thing is if we use the voluntary market scenario, we could see, show you, that here we have cumulative liabilities, but in that case we have accumulative assets. Even with the cumulative carbon footprint, thanks to this combination of both avoided and carbon footprint, we could get accumulative assets. So when we see these figures, we have to think that below the line, these are assets, and up these are liabilities. So this is a graphic explanation of how to transform liabilities, not doing nothing, into assets, doing both renewables or clean energies, reduction avoided emissions, plus carbon sequestration. No, right. So let me know. Finally, when if we make a competitive closure solution analysis, I made here in all the solutions: energy, cultural heritage, regenerative agricultural, cattle, natural-based solution, blue carbon, etc., with emission reduction, carbon capture, water retention, biodiversity, social, this is job potential, soil erosion, and food security. We could see that the most positive solutions for mining could be regenerative agriculture and cattle. It's 18 points. And also all the things linked to agroforestry and forestry, 14 to 16. And finally, the best of one is if we could combine this regenerative agriculture with bioenergy, we could arrive to 19 points. This is the matrix. No? So finally, okay, we know the problem, we know how to do, but how can we measure all this stuff? So due to the work with Cresco, we have developed several instruments that help you to decarbonize environmental and socially, and connecting the dots between social jobs, environmental water, and decarbonization carbon in mining closure rehabilitation. So we have first a mining carbon footprint estimator that could answer this kind of questions. What is the carbon footprint of the mine or the company with the scope 1, 2, and 3? A second is a mining carbon footprint appraiser. That's what is the cost. So we have to involve now the value of carbon, sorry, irrespective of the forecast of value. What is the cost of the carbon footprint of the mine of the company now and based on Bloomberg New Energy Finance? Third, a mining carbon footprint scenarios builder, as we saw in the example before. What net zero or net positive carbon scenarios could we deploy with combining clean energies in mine offsets or assets, social and environmental aspects? And finally, a mining carbon footprint scenario solver. It means that, for example, you have to achieve a net zero by 2025 to 2035. And a net positive by 2040 with 500 megawatts of solar PV. You have both, or you have the plan of 500 solar PV, but you need the solution of how much in mine offsets or assets and social environment that you need to in order to achieve this goal. No, this is a solver point of view. So finally, the mine solutions. We talk today about the decarbonization equations, so carbon footprint balance with avoid CO2 emissions, carbon capture and sequestration, a social footprint balance with lost jobs and circular jobs, a water footprint balance, water used and increased water retention, and then we offer you a carbon abatement analysis toolbox with mining carbon footprint estimation, mining carbon footprint appraisal, scenarios builder, and a scenario solver. With these scenarios, you could develop your provision, and to better focus in the circular economy. And of course, in order to solve all these problems, we talk at the beginning of the presentation on basically ESG. No? So thank you very much, and I would like to finish with these two quotes. It's in God we trust. All other must bring the data. This is William Edwards Deming. This is the father of total quality management. And this one, to measure is to know. And if you cannot measure it, you cannot improve it, of William Thomson, the first Lord Kelvin. So that's all. Okay. You have on mute, I think.
Thank you, Arnaldus. Very interesting presentation. A couple things stuck out to me I'd like to highlight, and then I'd like to go through the questions in the chat box and then open up the floor for debate. One thing that really struck out to me is in one of your initial slides, you mentioned obviously the three main risks to miners being, environmental and social, decarbonization, and license to operate. But then the other two, to put it in layman's terms, essentially is really two separate things, one being greenwashing and the other one being NIMBY. I think we all are equally aware of that. We've all picked up flack with that in our planning, etc. And I think that, I don't know how many of you saw, but my LinkedIn has been all abuzz in the last few days by sort of greenwashing accusations by John Oliver of The Guardian. Every now and again this happens. There's a lot of noise getting created. There's a lot of flack in the carbon offset markets, and I think that scared all of us from pursuing carbon offsets. The approach that we're looking at here is very different. It's in-house development or co-development using mine assets or mine land already. The reason that carbon offsets is getting shut down is because it's been difficult to measure until today. The technology is getting better, the measurement is getting better, but it's still difficult to measure today. But that's half the reason. It's been difficult to measure what effect that is having. So I would like to state two observations from my side. Carbon offsets are getting shut down because they're difficult to measure and because there's been a lot of dodgy projects. Carbon offsets is a mechanism, a financial and business mechanism, structuring mechanism to obviously procure carbon, in the same way that a PPA is procured to some extent outside of your business. You purchase those credits as an offset. A lot of the greenwashing accusations going on there, they're saying that companies, corporates like ourselves are doing this so that they don't have to deal with getting rid of emissions in terms of scope 1 and scope 2, in other words, to avoid them needing to switch from fossil fuels to renewables. I find that not entirely true and somehow quite strong and misleading in some ways, although in other ways I do find it definitely compelling. So carbon offsets are getting shut down for that reason. And then renewables are getting shut down for another reason. And that's really because, sorry, I don't know why I'm seeing myself twice on the screen, excuse me. So renewables are getting shut down for two reasons. And one is that reaching 100% renewables is very difficult to do with today's technology, unless you are in a very liberalized market where you can buy a lot of excess renewables. But in the Southern African context, where most of us are, it's very difficult to go to 100% renewables today. As we all know this conversation, we can get to PV and wind, but once you start looking at long duration batteries, hydrogen, etc., it's difficult to achieve that 100% renewables. And the second element that renewables, I think, unfortunately, will pick up some flack in the near future is that we all touted at the beginning of the industry how the job creation aspect of renewables was a great thing, from manufacturing to development to construction to operation, but it's been a bit less than some of those modeling together. So what is dawning on me is that as we're going from clean energy towards climate solutions, and as net zero and decarbonization has become an umbrella that has somehow overtaken or absorbed clean energy and all types of energy, we're moving to these things where we can't only be looking at renewables, we can't only be looking at carbon offsets, we can't only be looking at nature-based solutions or carbon capture and sequestration, whether by nature-based or technologies, but we need to have a diversified set of solutions. We need to measure and appropriately compare these solutions. And for the financiers and the engineers in the room, we need to understand how much this costs, what are all the financial implications of doing so, and for the engineers, of course, how it's going to work. And then, of course, for the carbon accountants, how can we confirm and comply that this is meeting these targets that we are all set and ultimately need to be bound to. So there's three questions there in the box from Liam Candy of Anglo American. Arnold, going to address that to you. Is the biomass energy being coupled with carbon capture storage in this case? And at what dollar per ton CO2? I don't know whether you have that off the top of your head or if we need to go and look that up. But that's our first question.
This is a good question. Really, when you burn the biomass, you are emitting CO2. But first, you have captured the CO2. So in that case, we are on a neutral space. But if this energy displaces diesel, for example, or displaces coal, are really positive. So in the balance point of view, is an asset. In the profit and loss, no. Have you understood? This is for this reason, it's very important to understand the term net. When we say net zero, we think about net zero emissions. but we have to think about the net zero completely balanced. In that case, biomass is really, when we burn biomass, we compensate the capture. But if we displace non-renewable energy, is positive. If we displace solar PV, no. But usually biomass is a good combination to develop with. Is the best long-term battery. This is the solution in order to combine with solar PV.
Liam, I don't know if that answers your question, or if you might have any comments or questions on that answer, if you're still on the line there.
I think Liam had to leave.
Oh, you had to leave. Okay, fantastic. I'm going to move to Kirsten Hunt's question from De Beers. So it'd be good to add some concrete numbers for CO2 sequestration per hectare for the different ideas. There are plenty of possibilities, but the challenge when it comes to carbon credits is really getting anything to a scale that makes a dent. Great question, great point. That is absolutely key. I think, Arnoldus, I'll hand it over to you, and then I might also give. Yeah.
So my answer is that 3 years ago we were in the worst in worse solution than today. No. So I think in 2-3 years, all this question will be solved. We are now at the end of the phase of science, not engineering. So science usually uses the proof, the cause, that this is maybe 100 tons of CO2 capture. No, this is not so. But anyway, I'm based on the specific job in Australia, especially in Australia and the US. And they are using that. And for example, Rabobank is also developing carbon credits in Peru and in Colombia and other places, and selling these credits. And they are measuring until the end of last year. They measure only the roots and the plant, but they are now developed the new algorithms to also certify the biological, when we say the fungi, the biological sequestration for all that. So we will see in the next, not more than 1-2 years. So finally, now is the time to prove and even to develop new standards. And I think mining has a great opportunity to do that, because it's one of the leading sectors, and also because mining owns territory. Other type of industries, no. So we will see. But I don't have any doubt that finally we have to invest more money in that area and less money in hydrogen, for example, because hydrogen is a solution for in the next 8 or 10 years. This is a solution we have today. I don't know if I answer the question or.
Kirsten, if you're still on the line there, any comments or open to debate there?
I completely agree, but I think it's two things, right? I completely agree that there's a lot of work we all need to do, or to develop methodologies to measure carbon. But at the same time, if I wanted to plant spec boom on a closure site, right? That is just reforestation. We have perfectly valid methodologies to measure that. But that means on a closure site, that would give me a few hundred credits, right? It would not, the volume would be very, very little for quite a big effort, to be frank. So I think that there's that piece as well. So yes, there's a better methodology, but I think there's also a real challenge that well, all of us as miners, right? We need good quality offsets, but we also need volume. And the question of how do we get to volume without overturning massive pieces of land is a real big challenge.
Yeah, that's a key point.
Let me tell you, there's a solution. First, you have to develop your own territory, and when you have proved and you have developed how to measure and how to certify, then you can lend from outside. But this is the problem is that not only mining, other type of industries start to do offsets before to make onsets. If you start to do onsets and then prove the methodologies and the value on all this stuff, then you could work with the communities, with other territories. But when you have this first step, because if not, it's very difficult to make decisions.
I see we have well, firstly, a comment from John McQuena regarding Gold Reef City. I actually had forgotten about that or hadn't thought of that. And yes, well noted on that positive example back home. And then a question from Andrew Johnson. I think just a last question there. I don't know if you can read it there in the box there, Arnaldus, but just regarding the effectiveness of various different biomass crops to sequester carbon emissions, you know, from the carbon emitted from combusting the crop, and that some are more neutral than others. Do you sort of agree with that understanding?
Right. So, but the specific question is?
Sorry, I was just to, I don't know if you can read it up there in the chat box on all this, but it's just to say that Andrew Johnson from Osmotic says that he understands from US EPA emissions guidelines factor that the neutrality of biomass power plants depends on the effectiveness of the biomass crop to sequester carbon emissions via the carbon emitted from combusting the crop, and that some crops are more neutral than others. Many do not provide a neutral operation. Is this also your understanding?
Okay. The great difference between biomass and the rest of renewables is biomass is like mining. And I tell you why. Because when we talk about mining, we have to think that there are coal mines, copper mines, gold mines. There are a lot of differences between one and others. In biomass, it's the same. We are talking about biosystems, there's completely different forestry in Canada than a semi-desert in Australia. So that depends on the area we are. But in the last 3 years, there is a great development of new technology in the biomass side that they solve most of the problems we have. There are a lot of examples. Biochar, for example, that captures and also increases a lot of carbon sequestration. So every project is like a mine. You have to make a pre-feasibility study or a scope study, pre-feasibility, feasibility. It's not like solar PV or wind energy that is more easy to commoditize or use as a commodity. No, so this is we have to study in depth. There are some possibilities in one way or other possibilities, but especially pay attention about that. We are not talking only about carbon. We have to think about social and environmental. Even if carbon is not completely neutral, but it's positive in social and environmental. So basically you are solving problems. If you don't,
and I think, sorry to interrupt on all this, so we've got 1 minute to go, and I anticipate people are going to drop off en masse for following calls, and that is really, I see it's already starting. So thank you very much, everybody for attending. Thank you, Arnaldus, for presenting. We will share these slides. We're doing quite a bit of work, Cresco and R for Mining and various partners in our network on this. If you'd like to reach out and discuss this, we are available for separate and private meetings. This is a fascinating topic. We're looking to optimize and extract the most value, you know, that we can out of your assets for, you know, issues of carbon, jobs, environment, and all of these things as we are all going through this mass systems upgrade. So thank you very much for your time. We'll share the slides. Please reach out to us if you'd like further discussion. Thank you, Dr. Arnaldus.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.